even if I'm working for so many different companies and you find their image in the instruments, I hope there's something to find that is my language, that is, yeah, it's my mindset, when I start sorting out functions. But it's not only the industrial design. In many cases, I get an idea of how the interface should look, but then I start rearranging and emphasizing certain parts and things like that.
Axel, hi, and welcome to Happy.
Yes, hi too, and great to see you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Now, today we are talking about the Mark 8. That is the reason that I reached out, and I'm so grateful that you've joined us and willing to chat about it. But look, context is everything. Some background would be fantastic. So I'd love to know about where you live, maybe even a little bit about your working environment, because that's also always quite interesting to people.
I'm living in the south of Germany, beautiful south of Germany. It's the place I live is quite close to the Swiss and the Austrian border. So if I look out of the window of my house, the very top, I can see the Alps.
Wow.
So it's that close. I moved here in the year of 95. That was the time when I left Waldorf. Waldorf was the first company I was working for as an in-house designer right after university. And I wanted to found my own business with a friend in 95, and it took us here. As an industrial designer, it's not we found that it's not that important where you are. So I didn't have to move to Frankfurt or so to be really in the center of the country and have all these opportunities to fly, easy, quick airport connection, stuff like that. So that's all possible from here too. Not that easy. But the main reason was because it's really a nice place to live.
That's right. A lot can be said for being in inspirational spaces anyway, right? So if it's a beautiful surrounding and you're close to nature, that helps with design, I'm sure.
It helps with everything. If you have the right mood and you're living in an environment that is like freshening you up every morning, you wake up and you're in the center of nature. That's nice. I'm a countryman. I'm not like I didn't grow up in a city. I grew up in a little village, and that's almost the same here. My son, he grew up in a little village, so I like that kind of environment. My office is a bit closer to the next bigger town. So the bigger town is Ravensburg, world famous for their board games, even in Australia. Yeah. So they I think they invented the jigsaw puzzle many years back, and they are pretty famous. So if you have kids and you go to a toy store, you may find these board games with a blue triangle in the right corner. So you may remember that if you have kids.
I do, and they've outgrown those games, but yeah, that triangle rings a bell, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so, and this company is from Ravensburg, so it's one of the most important companies here. They have a lot of employees, bring a lot of work into Ravensburg, and we've been working for them too. So I made designs for them many years, game toys. I once designed a little electronic xylophone for them. So the connection was we have a little bit of connection also into these industries that are close by. But
you're speaking. You're kind of speaking right into my next question, which is, what is your elevator pitch to people who don't know what you do? What do you say you do?
I'm a specialist in designing electronic musical instruments, and people they don't really understand what means design. So it's industrial design. In the English language, there's not. Designing a PCB is kind of the same thing that pops up in your mind, like designing the outside of a musical instrument.
Right.
So I'm doing industrial design, helping the brands or the companies that come to me to industrialize their product idea, to give it a look, a feel, ergonomics, everything that a product, an industrialized product needs. But all with focus on the musician. As I'm a musician myself, I always wanted to be a musician, but it didn't work out. So I had this other skill, and I made that my proper business then.
And the world is better for it, Axel. Thanks.
Yeah, maybe it's for the better. You never know. A good friend of mine, he's Hans Zimmer. he just made it, but not everybody sounds similar, you know. So you really, if I thought maybe going for something that's a bit more solid. So that's where I landed in the end. But I still could combine that with my major hobby, which is music. So I design the instruments for the musicians with the heart and the view of a musician, and that's probably my secret sauce.
I felt like I could come into this without doing much research, but I did do a little bit, and I hadn't seen your website before last week, and I've come to the conclusion that everybody needs a timeline like Axel Hartmann's timeline, regardless of what they do. This isn't a question, this is a comment, because that timeline is just, we all have these kind of pivotal moments in our life. Yours just happens to be anchored with some of the most famous synth designs of the last 20 years or more. So I love that. I love the timeline on your site. Thanks for sharing that with the world.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
What I didn't know that you were in-house at Waldorf. So, you know, I noticed that there was a couple of things that you did early on, early 80s. There was a bit of a gap there. So I had a question about a pivotal moment when you decided that industrial design in, you know, electronic musical instruments was going to be your thing. But I guess maybe understanding a bit about those early stages would be interesting, and it may help inform what I'm about to ask next.
The early stages, well, I started studying industrial design in the mid 80s, and I must really say it was always my plan to combine music and industrial design. So the final, you say the diploma work. So you have to build something yourself. You have to come up with an idea and show that to your professor. So that was my idea, was to show something that I could use to hook up with the companies that built this kind of instruments, synthesizers or workstations back then. So that was always my plan. I was a bit when I came from I don't know what's the name we say the school, when I was like 18, 19 years old when I finished that, I knew I was going to be a musician. That and I tried to run through the tests that you had to do to study music in Germany, and I didn't pass. You know, I was not well prepared. Not because I was lazy, but simply because I didn't know how that works. You know, I was from a small village. My piano teacher, he didn't really know how to prepare me, something like that. So it didn't happen. And I was really lost for quite a while because I didn't know what to do, because that was so my focus. And then lucky moment, I thought, okay, let me check out this design school that we had close by. And so that looked really like this is my thing.
Nice.
Yeah, and right from that school, you know, I made that work as diploma. It was a keyboard, Gambit. I was kind of trying to get in touch with the companies that were on stake back then. That was like, Fairlight, New England Digital, Oberheim. PPG was just like gone down. And that was the hook that somebody gave me. When I made this work, when I worked on my diploma, I was asking many pro musicians, and one of them was the house keyboard guy from Frank Farian. He's a pretty famous guy in Germany. He had a band, Bonnie M. I don't know if they're famous in Australia. They were really big. They were almost like ABBA in Europe.
Amazing.
So I knew this guy who played the keyboards. He's a good friend of mine, Pete Löw. And he told me, he said, well, why don't you write a letter to Wolfgang Düren? He's trying to restart PPG.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I wrote him a letter, and I got hired by Waldorf was the name of the company back then, already in '89. So they hired me as an in-house designer.
So were you involved in the microwave? Were you?
That was my first design that I ever made.
Amazing.
In this
so that's
world.
A pretty huge claim to fame, Axel. Because if you look into that, this is, if I'm not mistaken, the end of the Japanese and American monopoly of synthesizers in the world, right? It's.
Yeah, maybe it started from the heart of Germany and from the heart of the evolving techno, new electro scene. Yep. And PPG had such a great name, was such a great name in the industries because it probably was the first affordable digital synthesizer. And I remember when I heard the PPG the first time in my life, I was just blown away because it sounded so different and strong and like glass, you know, all these
Yeah,
sounds that you couldn't get out of an analog synthesizer. And I couldn't understand why this company went down. And now I had the chance to work on that same technology, just in a modern finish. You know,
amazing.
it's been a
Yeah,
19-inch device, which is not like something. If you're an industrial designer, you want to do shapes and things. So, but that was just like it's two-dimensional, you know.
yeah.
But still, it was not only the microwave. I was coming into Waldorf at a point where they didn't have a logo, they didn't have a corporate identity, nothing. So that's all came from my inside. You
Very
know,
cool.
I
Very cool.
created the logo,
Yeah.
I created the language of the company. I made all their advertisements that were partly really humorous, really funny, and we were really taking it. You know, we knew the market was there was a flood of PCM sample based synthesizers that didn't even have proper filtering, stuff like that. And the microwave was so different. It had just 8 voices, you know. Back in the early 90s, 8 voices was nothing, you know. So that was really, it was square and it was fun and it was all this in this, we were a little team. We were just like 6 or 7 people working on that, and we were kind of, we thought we shaped the synthesizer market,
Yeah,
the synthesizer business.
that's lovely. Yeah.
Yeah.
You touched on identity there, and that's really interesting. Like you work with a lot of companies. Admittedly, I didn't know that you were in house at Waldorf, but Waldorf is a great case in point. When you're brought into a third-party organization and they say, Axel, we've got this great new idea. How much of it is Moog? Let's take Moog as an example because you've worked with them a few times. And how much of it is Axel? And how important is that? Is that part of those early conversations?
Absolutely, absolutely, especially in regards of Moog. Moog is such a strong name, you know,
Yeah.
they invented the synthesizer. And I was so unbelievably proud and happy when Bob Moog was still alive. You know, he died in 2005, and we got in touch in 2002 or 2003, 2002 at a NAMM show where I showed my Neuron synthesizer. So he had his booth right aside my booth,
Yeah.
and I saw this man on his knees. He was kind of carving wood for the new Voyager that he wanted to
Wow.
show at this event. It was his first synthesizer, his comeback, and so I started as I think this is something you really have to feel. You have to put what you can do to the company and to their corporate image. That's a very, I would say, you really need to be open-minded. You need to understand what the company's core attitudes are. That's something I always, especially with Moog, it's so important that they keep their vibe. You know, they
Yeah,
have
man.
this
Of course.
in-your-face interface. They have this traditional rotary knobs, the knurly knobs. They have the wood. There's certain elements that make a Moog instrument, but
Yeah.
still, I think with the first radical design that we worked on together was a little fatty.
Yeah.
And that was their first synthesizer where we tried. It was Mike Adams, their managing director. His request was he wants to have an instrument that is industrialized, which was not true with instruments that Moog built before. So our business was to give him a design that is easy to build, that
Okay.
is not that you can put on a, how do you say, on the street where you build the instruments, how do you call that, a line,
Oh
an
yeah, yeah,
industrialized
yep,
line,
yep, yep.
instruments like that. And parts of
Production
it,
line, I
they
guess.
should
Production
come
line,
in,
right? Production line. Yeah.
yeah, like a production line,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, so that was the core request. Well, and then they wanted this shape. They wanted the interface, the 40 or 43 degree angle interface. And I came to the idea with a curve, and that's on the backside of the Moog. That is kind of iconic, and that's kind of easy to do. You need to know the process, and I think this was something where they were really happy that they had such an inspirational design that still has their language, but that's easy to produce, and that you can see from the far. You can see the shape of
Oh,
that
it's
instrument
iconic. Yeah,
from.
yeah, absolutely. You immediately
Yeah,
know it's a little fatty. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So, and that was my entree into Moog, and we've been working together on many iconic instruments until the Moog One was my latest design for them,
Yep.
and that was quite a journey.
It's
The
a beast.
company
It's an
Moog
absolute beast.
changed
I got a
from.
chance to demo that when it first came out, and I just was like, "This is.
Yeah,
I need a month with
yeah.
this."
I always try to, if a company already has that, like Moog, they have their corporate language. People know what to expect and how a Moog instrument does look like and has to look like. But then there's companies like UDO
Hmm.
or smaller companies that come to me that don't have an image at all. Arturia, back in the time, in
Yeah.
the early 2000s, they didn't have a clue how their hardware instruments should look. They just made these beautiful software
Yeah,
instruments
that's
where they
right.
mocked up the real world instrument. I think they were one of the first companies who did that, and they did it very successfully. But they didn't. They wanted to build hardware, and they didn't have a clue. So their hardware face is also my work. Not only the industrial design, but the entire corporate language of these instruments.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. I love it. Yeah, I think it requires, I mean, a skill set in design, obviously, but also empathy on your part to be able to join that brand language of those companies and make something that is theirs and yours. Because when I look at your timeline, which I really enjoyed, and I'm sure not everything you've done is on there, it also does look like you. It looks like your stuff too. So it's a lovely marriage of the two things. So not only have you merged successfully with the existing brand language of Moog, but it actually looks like an Axel Hartmann design as well, which is
Oh,
great.
thank you.
Yeah,
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 that is something. I hope that even if I'm working for so many different companies and you find their image in the instruments, I hope there's something to find that is my language.
yeah,
That is the well, it's always kind of the same way I approach a project like that, and yeah, it's my mindset.
yeah,
When I start sorting out functions, and but it's not only the industrial design. In many cases, I get an idea of how the interface should look, but then I start rearranging and emphasizing certain parts and things like that.
very
It's
cool.
always in a cooperation between the project manager of that company and myself. And finally, it ends up to be the instrument that you can find in the stores then
Yeah.
later on.
Except,
But
of course, in the one instance
yeah.
where, and I can see you've got the remote behind you, the Neuron. I forget
Oh
what
yeah,
the.
it's there. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I was one of very few people who bought the full-sized Hartmann Neuron back in the day.
Oh wow, thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It brought a lot of joy for the years that I had it. I ended up selling it because I think the computer went a bit funny. But
Yeah.
some of the sounds, well, every synth needs a joystick, so I'm a massive fan of having joysticks on synthesizers. And I need to return to that sound bank at some point in my production future because I really, really enjoyed working with it. So it's great to see that you've got one sitting there in the background, at least the
Yeah.
VST the remote
Yeah.
controller.
It's the little remote.
Yeah,
That is the one that wanted to save our lives at Hartmann back then. We because that machine it grew so much more expensive than we thought it could, and
yeah,
so we wanted something that is like affordable for the how do you say for the normal guy,
yeah, yeah,
who just wants the sound. So we combined that with the software.
yeah.
Yeah, it was. When I look at it, it's like 20 years
I
ago.
know. Yeah. No, it's a great.
Interesting.
It's a great synth.
Yeah.
It's a shame there was no number two, but I'm sure it's something you think about from time to time. So look, we need to. We should talk about the roads.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
please. Yeah.
yeah, the Mark 8. So you're credited with the exterior design. I'm sure you were involved from the very early stages. Tell us a bit about when they approached you and what that conversation was like.
Well, they approached me through Dan Goldman. He's a Goldman. He's unbelievable, Dan. I knew him from some videos that sometimes I just at Facebook. So there's something popping up that I like, and he's a great player and a great musician. And he was calling me 2.5 years ago for Rhodes. And he told me the story about Rhodes, that they kind of made a contract with Brandstätter, who's kind of owning the brand. You probably know the background. And they wanted me to be involved into this project. I remember maybe 10 years before that, or 8 years before that, I had that call from Brandstätter to design the Mark 7, and I sent him an offer, but he didn't want it. He made it with a local industrial design company, which is fine. But I was a bit sad back then because the Rhodes was such an influential instrument for me.
I didn't know that story. That's so interesting. Yeah.
I bought a Mark 1 when I was like 16 or 17. I didn't buy. My grandfather bought it for me. And I had, it was such an influential time for me, and it was like sitting there for me playing with my bands. It was a matter of love and hate until I exchanged it with a CP70, which is what I actually really wanted. I wanted a real stage piano. But back in the days, in the 70s, you didn't have a lot of options, You had the Rhodes, and then there was the first electronic instruments were popping up, but they didn't feel right. The Rhodes is something that is so organic.
Absolutely.
It's really more than just what I thought it should be. It should be my piano on stage, my stage piano, but it sounds totally different.
I know.
It has its own sound. So it also influenced the way you play and you listen. So it was a real experience that kind of deeply inspired me. And I was a bit sad when I didn't get that job with Brandstätter, I must say. I was really sad. I thought, well, why? Because I knew I can do the job. I can do a good job on that. And I knew exactly what the people want. They don't want a piano that looks like a Cadillac. They want something that kind of tickles their nerves, that reminds them on the beauty of the instrument when it came up. This is what it was my second chance when Dan called me, and I was like, I get still getting goosebumps when I think of it. It was like, Dan is such a friendly person. He's like approaching me like I was a superstar, like that. And I said, okay, hey, I'm so glad you're calling. Let's do that together. And he's my first contact person into this new Rhodes company back then, and we kind of it was a close relationship. I knew what a Rhodes needs to have, to make a nice Rhodes. He knows much better. So because he's like a nerd, he's inside this instrument like nobody else on this planet, I think. And so this cooperation was just so inspirational. And Dan is such a nice person. It was really fun to work on that. And then I created these first designs. We always work in several rounds when we do an industrial design. So we work out a few ideas and we show them our clients. And it was also, it's such a positive vibe. And I must confess, because the Rhodes is such a complex instrument, there's so much mechanics going on in there. I must confess, in the beginning, I thought, okay, we can try that, but I don't know if this guy is really gonna make it to the final product.
Right.
Because it's such enormous, challenge to have everything right.
Well, they're sourcing different things. They're sourcing keyboards. They're sourcing different elements from different parts of the world as well. A best-in-class approach can take years to get right.
Yeah. So, and they made it. They have, I think, a good foundation. Matt Pelling and Tim Dawson, their managing directors, they have a bit a good background. So they really put a lot of effort and money into this project, more than anybody else probably had tried before. And now they have a proper Mark 8. I think I played this instrument at Super Booth this year in May, first time, and it just blew me away, because everything that I hated at my Rhodes Mark 1 was gone. The keyboard feels nice and balanced. It's direct. It can have all the sounds that you want from a Rhodes, it's really a great instrument. And bringing that all together, I can only say from my experience that this is really, really something.
Cool.
I think a brand like Roland or Yamaha, they would never do something like that
No, it's a
because
bold
you need.
move, and I'm glad you mentioned that. And
Yeah,
I want to be devil's advocate just for a second.
yeah, yeah,
It is the age of the clone and the reissue. There's no doubt about it. The old brands are recognizing the appetite for
yeah.
a new generation who wants the old stuff. What I've seen happen, I've seen Roland do it with reissues of their old synths in smaller formats. I even bought a JU, like a Juno clone, and I don't like it. But people are buying them, they're lapping them up, and the rule of thumb is that they're cheaper, they're more accessible, they sound just as good, but the Rhodes is breaking those rules. I have a 73.
Absolutely.
I've got a Mark
Yeah,
1. I love it. It's horrible to play, but everybody loves it.
yeah.
The sound is incredible, but I could probably sell it for $7,000, maybe $8,000. If I'm going to buy a Mark 8, it's almost double that in Australia. The devil's advocate in me is saying,
Yeah.
God, I hope it does well, but is there going to be a market for this thing? Is it just a vanity project, or is it going to do well?
Yeah, I totally get that, and I also read the comments when you on the social media, and I mean they do their advertising there, and when you read the comments, many of them say, "Oh, they're crazy. Why does it cost so much?
Right.
I don't understand. Why can't they build something for the people?" And things like that, But this instrument is really, it's a mechanical instrument. It's built with love. They don't earn a lot of money with it, believe me. It's just that expensive to build something like that in today's times. And I see it more like it's not a reissue of something. It's just the next step in the story. It's
Great.
just like if Steinway comes up with a new grand piano. I must really say this is not it's not like a mock-up of something that's been there. It's the next step in the story. And they don't mimic something. They just have something and make it really good.
Well, I think we've got about half a dozen
Yeah.
or so coming to Australia. Our hope is that we get one here that we can demo and do a video on. I hope that the company does well. I've spoken to a few team members there, and the passion is absolutely infectious. So they're all very excited to be doing what they're doing, and I think it's fantastic that they got you involved. Some crazy questions that I just want to ask. Do you have a copy of every synth you've designed?
Not every,
Yeah.
But I do have copies of some.
Yeah.
The very expensive ones. I have this in my contract, but I don't force the companies to do that. If I can, sometimes we can have a deal with a company, and I kind of say, okay, I give you a few hours of my work, and please give me one of those instruments.
Fantastic.
So I have a little, you don't see it from here. So on the back of my office, I have a little shelf. It's like 10 meters wide and 2 layers. And there's many of the instruments that I designed are
Nice.
sitting there, and they're hooked up. You can play them.
Yep.
That's very inspirational, and also nice for the people that come into my office to see what's there, So unfortunately, not all of them.
I absolutely love brands like Dreadbox and Critter and Guitari, and these guys that are embracing kind of like, is it a pedal, is it a synth? And doing things very piecemeal and from very small budgets at an early stage and building up from there. I wondered what your opinion on that was, and whether or not it's a renaissance in the synth world, or if it's something else, because when I look back, I think of Bob Moog and Tom Oberheim, and we lost Dave Smith earlier this year. I want to see more of this. I want to see more young designers coming up in the world, but it's morphing into something new and interesting, and I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, well, I would compare it with music. If you think rock music or pop music, when I was young in the 70s, 80s, in our school, we all had the same albums. everybody. So that's like Oberheim, Moog, and Yamaha. And so there were only these few companies. And today we're running into a situation where you have multiple bands, you have multiple styles in music, you know, and I feel the same thing is happening in the on the gear side. So modern technology gives you the opportunity to create something that's quite professional in a very small, I would say, environment.
Yep.
If you're a genius guy, you can do it yourself. You can, if you know how to write code and how to talk to the DSP or to the FPGA, you can come up with a proper instrument, you know, electronic instrument, maybe a guitar effect or synthesizer or whatever, or just a digital signal processing for the musician. That's what's happening. And if you're clever enough, you can create a proper fundraising campaign and you get some money in, and you can come to a point where you really build instruments and sell these instruments. And that can be the spark for something big. Not everywhere. So I think it's getting more like diffuse. There's more,
but it's fun to see. It's definitely fun to see it
yeah.
happening. Yeah, it's definitely a lot of fun to see it happening out there. Thank you so much for joining us today, Axel. Congrats on your collaboration with Rhodes. We look forward to seeing it out in the world. And I hope that when you're in Australia, we can get you out here and we can catch up in person.
Absolutely, that would be my pleasure. So thanks for calling in and for letting me have there and talk.
Thank you, Axel.
That's always nice and inspiring.
Thank you so much.
See you soon. Bye.
Yeah.